Barely Got Here is a collection of stories and conversations based on 24 years in law enforcement. You have the right to be disturbed by some of the content or disagree with the viewpoints. Anything you hear can and will be dosed with sarcasm and dark humor. You have the right to know that discussions will often be graphic with language and themes that are intended for a mature audience. Do you understand your rights? Then buckle up, Buttercup. We're going 10-8. Hello and welcome back to I Barely Got Here. I'm your host, Kevin Booncher. This will be episode number 5, Precious. I was a sergeant working in special investigations, managing a UC squad of 5 detectives. They were all working various investigations, assisting with surveillance for other work groups, and helping me take care of the never-ending requests for help within the department. Our squad had to have the ability to move and flex manpower on a moment's notice, and the guys all understood that. In addition to this primary assignment, our squad was comprised of all SWAT officers and had additional duties and responsibilities we dealt with, such as training, call-outs, equipment issues, etc. When they weren't helping someone else out, they could work other investigations on their own or with other bureaus or squads within special investigations. It could get very frustrating for them and for me, but we somehow always got things done and they were able to work some great cases. So there's a homicide that occurred in an older part of our city, an area known for having one of the oldest established gangs in the Phoenix area. It was generational, meaning that there could be a grandfather, father, and son from the same household all involved with this gang at the same time. These folks had strong neighborhood ties, and some of the worst incidents would occur when a rival gang would come into the area and try to stir up trouble. This area presented a number of problems directly related to that gang: fights, drive-bys, crazy parties. And depending on the temperature of the gang members, there were times we couldn't respond to calls in there unless we went in 3 deep or more. And even then, we'd sometimes get rocked or have bottles and rocks thrown at our car as we went down a street. It also wasn't uncommon for an officer to get assaulted by one or more of these guys on a call. There were also very nice families that were trying to live in that neighborhood, and they just wanted to live their lives apart from the gang's influence and problems. I always felt for these folks. They had to really struggle with things and often couldn't move out of the area even if they wanted to. There was a party at one of the gang-affiliated houses, as there often was, even off the weekends. This party house was next to one of the people I mentioned earlier, a family that didn't want anything to do with them. As a result, there was always tension between that family and the house next door with the revolving door for gangbangers and their friends. The party next door got a little loud and out of control, and the family next door wasn't happy about it. The grandfather walked out into his driveway and yelled at the partygoers next door to quiet down. That didn't go over very well. A few of the gangbangers standing outside took offense at being yelled at by this old man and went over to his house to let him know. Once they got in front of the grandfather, their words exchanged, and then one of the gang members pulled out a handgun, pointed it at the old man, and shot him in the chest. Just like that. The shooter and his friends fled the area, and unfortunately the grandfather died shortly afterward. He died because he confronted a bunch of cowardly thugs who couldn't stand having their manhood and immature behavior challenged by this old man. It was a sad scene, and his family took things hard with outbursts of grief, anger, frustration, and other negative emotions after having just watched their grandfather and father die for no good reason. The homicide dicks arrive at the scene and they get to work. And based on the location and the witness statements, the gang unit is called to help as well. It doesn't take long before these detectives get the shooter identified, and I don't recall his name, but I'll never forget his gang nickname: Precious. This guy's dangerous for a number of reasons, and he's proven without a doubt that he is willing and able to kill for very little reason, and now he's on the run. At the time of the homicide, we knew that Precious was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, but it still takes a cold, ruthless person to be able to knowingly take another person's life with almost no reason. Once this guy's identified and there's PC or probable cause to arrest him, the gang detective sergeant comes to our unit, and it's all hands on deck to assist with finding and apprehending this guy. The more time that goes by, the more chance of him either hurting someone else or the chance that some poor cop runs across him, not knowing he's a homicide suspect, and gets shot at during a vehicle stop. I coordinate the information on where this guy may be with the gang sergeant, and we build a large surveillance detail with nearly all the folks in our Special Investigations Bureau, as well as a few detectives from other bureaus. Based on his history and the gang unit's opinion, we don't think he'll venture far from his usual neighborhood, and that it'll probably be somewhere within this East Phoenix metro area. Electronic surveillance efforts produce no results, meaning this one will be a time-consuming, manpower-heavy, boots-on-the-ground and eyes-on-the-street effort. We will rely heavily on the gang unit and the homicide Dix's info to guide us toward potential locations we can find him. As for my squad, and with regard to the fugitive game, we strongly consider what we've found is about the most reliable plan for locating fugitives like this guy, other than using electronics. We find out where their mother lives and the mother or mothers of their children. We've found more fugitives like this than any other way. At the beginning of any briefing for a fugitive, we'd always ask, where's his mama live and where's his baby's mama live? This was one, however, of the rare occasions where this didn't pan out. One afternoon, the plan is to set up on a location in the city of Mesa, which borders our city to the east. We'll have about 12 people involved, some single in their UC cars, some doubled up, and one arrest team of 4 in a van, with numerous contingencies and plans depending on what we encounter and or see. The majority of these men and women have all worked similar surveillance details in the past, so I have a really good group of experienced detectives to work with. It's also important to try to get a patrol officer in a marked unit taken out of normal service and assigned to our surveillance detail. This gives us a clearly marked police vehicle for a vehicle stop attempt or any other thing that we may need a marked vehicle for. This officer will stay with us regardless of where we go in or out of the city. We knew which patrol officers were better than others at helping with details like this depending on what days or hours we were working, and would usually be able to get them to help us out. They would set up in the area, stay on our radio channel, and sit in their car for hours sharing in our boredom and discomfort. And if we couldn't get a patrol officer, then sometimes I'd have to assign a person from our bureau to work in a marked unit with us. Some of our UC vehicles were equipped with hidden red and blue LED lighting to identify us as the police when we activated it. These kits weren't as good as a marked police car, but it was much better than nothing. We had to perform many vehicle stops with our UC cars, and it can be a little odd to get pulled over by a Toyota minivan or a full-size pickup truck with red and blues flashing all over, especially when you see the motley crew that piles out. We get over to the surveillance location and start getting set up. The most important position to get set up is the eye. So the eye is simply whoever has the best look at the target location, such as a vehicle we're watching, the front door of a house or a condo, a driveway, or whatever. And the eye can be taken by anyone. It often comes down to who is in a better suited vehicle, which detectives are running single in their vehicles, if we have pre-planned positions, or simply who gets there first. You may have to set up uncomfortably close to get the eye, or sometimes you're so far away that the only way you can do it is through a pair of binoculars. It just all depends on the location and specifics of the surveillance. The eye is usually the most uncomfortable position to have, and we try to rotate it as much as possible within the surveillance team. But sometimes this just isn't possible due to the activity at the target location or activity in the parking lot or any other thing that may compromise us and let the people know that we're there. It wasn't uncommon for a person to get set up with the eye and still be there for 6 to 8 hours or more. So this means that you have to eat, try to stay hydrated, and relieve yourself, and most often sit in your car with it turned off and no air conditioning. When you knew that you had to work a surveillance like this fugitive detail or any of the wiretap surveillance details, you brought your lunch and you made sure you brought plenty of water. As to the bathroom situation, you always had what we called the whoopee, or a large sealable container that you could use while you're in the confines of a vehicle. It was often just a large Gatorade bottle or a sports bottle, anything that could keep a good seal if it got knocked around. And when you jumped into another detective's vehicle, you did your best to stay away from that piece of equipment. This surveillance detail was set up on a townhouse with unmarked cars and trucks and vans. They were set up in different places as needed to either see certain things or be able to go with or follow a vehicle that left the location. Someone took the eye on the front door of the target condo. Another 2-man vehicle got an eye on the walkway that led from the parking lot to the condo. By this time it's dark out, so that makes everything, especially the crucial eye positions, that much more difficult. They'd be able to see people, but it would be tough to identify our shooter. In situations like this, we would have to wait until the people moved from the darkness into some lighting, whether it was a parking lot or front porch light, someone's headlights illuminate them in the parking lot, or really anything we could use. Sometimes someone would have to jump out on foot and find a way to get close to them enough to make a positive ID. Anyone on surveillance would have to be ready to do any of the above, supervisors included. We sat there for hours. It wasn't summer, so at least we weren't cooking in our vehicles. Due to the activity in the area, most of us had to stay shut down. If you're in a vehicle with another detective, at least you could chat a little as long as there was no one else around your car. I was in my minivan with 3 other guys. The minivans are great for arrest teams or more than 3 surveillance people. We would take out the middle row of seats, so you just had the 2 front seats and the back row seat. It was fairly comfortable for 4 guys loaded up with all their gear, but we've had as many as 6 crammed in there for shorter details. With everybody wearing vests and other equipment and their weapons and helmets, that would turn into some serious quality bonding time. And if it was summer, holy hell, it would be stinky and miserable. The windows would fog up and we'd all be just dripping and pouring sweat like we were in a sauna. I was sitting in the passenger front seat with one of my guys driving and 2 more in the back. We were designated as a primary arrest team option, meaning if our surveillance team found the guy and we were going to make an attempt to arrest him at any point, my van would be the lead or the primary in that arrest effort. But that didn't mean it would always work out that way. If and when things got sideways, anyone on the detail had to be prepared to join in and help make the arrest, meaning they had to have their ballistic police raid vests on or right next to them ready to throw on in a matter of seconds. The preferred method to apprehend a guy like this was to get him out on foot, coming or going from somewhere. The eye would spot him, we'd get him ID'd as best we could, units would be set up appropriately around, and the arrest team would maneuver to a good position. Then we'd jump out and be on top of them so quickly that they'd usually be overwhelmed and in cuffs before they knew what was going on. And in the event that he took off running, a violent felon is much better for us to deal with on foot and safer for the public than if they're in a vehicle or get inside of a structure where other people are. And I keep referring to males as the only people that we arrest and the only ones that run and cause us trouble, but obviously women commit crimes and run from the police as well. But I have to say I never was involved in a major surveillance or takedown or a vehicle pursuit that involved a female during my whole career. It was always men. I mean, we arrested some women for violent felonies, but it always went easy and they didn't resist arrest like some of these guys did. So regardless of the best planning and masses of surveillance people around, you just don't know what the suspect's going to do, and we have to adjust and adapt to their actions and try to capture them without anybody getting hurt, including the suspect. You get to where you can predict various escape routes and plan accordingly, but you just never know until it happens. So the shift's moving along and there's no activity or really anything of interest, and it's starting to get late. I think I had us scheduled to work that night until about 2300 or 11 p.m. unless something started kicking off. You just never know if a location's going to pan out as well as they think it will or not. Sometime around 2100 or 9 p.m., a single cab pickup truck pulls into the parking lot and parks right next to my surveillance team that was in the parking lot. So the guys do their best to crunch down inside the cab to avoid being seen, and at the same time they watch as the 2 men from the truck walk away and toward our target condo. I throw a guy out on foot real quick to try to get close and ID them, but they go inside the condo before it can happen. After a short time, it appears that these same 2 men come walking out from our condo and head down the walkway toward the parking lot. Everybody snaps to full alert and we're listening intently to the radio. Inside my van, we're all shaking out our legs and arms and trying to shake out the stiffness from sitting for the last few hours. We all think this guy's going to run when we confront him. I'm sure the same was going on in the other cars. The eye in the parking lot describes 2 men walking towards the parking lot and towards them and that initial pickup truck that parked next to them earlier. One of the 2 guys in the UC surveillance truck in that parking lot was one of my guys on my squad, and we'll call him Slimmer. Like the rest of my squad, they're all great at surveillance. They're great at their jobs for that matter, and I really valued and trusted their judgment and opinions. Then that trust with Slimmer was about to be tested. As the 2 men get near to my guys in the truck, it's clear that they're walking right to that same truck that parked next to them earlier. The surveillance guys are again trying to lower themselves down in the front seat of their truck as much as possible, and Slimmer's muffling the radio speaker against his chest as other surveillance people chatter, but he's still giving updates in quiet whispers as best he can. Slimmer's almost inaudible as the 2 men get to that truck. He describes them as looking around quite a bit, and one being a possible for our target. At this point, these 2 men are within feet of the surveillance guys, but my guys are trying to hide inside a car, relay info on the radio, and watch and ID someone through dark tinted windows and slivers of windshield that you can see through past the folded out sunscreen shade on the dash, and do all that stuff in near darkness. Everybody knows that this is a time when there really shouldn't be anybody on the radio except for Slimmer and I. It's in this 30 seconds or so that I need to gather what info I can to ascertain if we're going to go with that truck with these two guys in it or if we're going to stay put. Not that the other people on their surveillance are just sitting still. The other cars, the cars that are designated to take away or follow any possible target vehicle, well, they're starting up and getting into better position, getting ready to jump out on whichever roadway they happen to be covering. And others are going to think about what they're going to do if the truck goes this way, if the people get out and go that way, if people flee, and other options. So the two guys get into this truck and they start to pull out. So this is it. Go or stay. Yes or no. I didn't see what Slimmer did, so there's really only time for one more piece of final information that I'll base my decision on to put a major mobile surveillance into motion on a potential homicide suspect. So I say, Slimmer, on a 1 to 10, how sure are you that that one guy is our target? I hate to put him on the spot like that, but I have no other choice, and quite frankly, that's his job in that position. He gives me his best answer. I'll say a soft 8, boss. Well, it ain't a 10, but it's close. And as with so many other things in police work, I have about 3 seconds to crunch all the info on the surveillance and the investigation up to this point, coupled with Slimmer's soft 8 answer. We're going with the truck. Stay on it, I tell everybody. There it is. Can't take it back. It may end with a dangerous felon capture, and it may end with a major car wreck during a pursuit where someone gets hurt. Things we work on have gone either way numerous times. Whatever it turns out to be, I'll ultimately be the one accountable for the operation and the results. The truck drives away from the condo complex and gets on a freeway fairly soon. The traffic is light as it's late and it's a weekday. Crooks being paranoid as they are, they usually are on the watch for surveillance by the police. And if this guy is our shooter, his and the other guys' heads will be on a swivel for sure. I have a really good group of detectives, like I said. We know how to work a surveillance like a finely tuned machine. You see vehicles cycle in and out, back and forth. They turn off and turn on. They pass and fall back. They roll on and off the eye. But ultimately, you can only do so much and still not lose a vehicle. The driver of the truck speeds up on the freeway, which is one sure way to see if you're being followed. Without air support or a helicopter, the lead surveillance car has no choice but to speed up and try to keep him in sight. Within a matter of minutes, it's clear that the driver of the truck is well aware that he's being followed. The truck accelerates to 85 or 90 as it barrels down this freeway. I get a couple of questions as to are we going to continue to follow the truck, so I put it out on the radio again. Stay with it. Do the best you can. We're working on getting air and some other marked units. As much as the guy driving my van is trying, we're trailing far behind due to our initial tight location at the complex, so we never even get a glimpse of this truck. The gang unit supervisor who was out with us for the surveillance is making calls trying to get us an air unit from the neighboring agency to give us a hand. A guy in my van is calling that same agency and trying to coordinate their patrol officers to help us out. At this point, I'd qualify this as a high-speed chase, but it's not a pursuit as defined by Arizona law. Once this was over, there was a lot of debate as to whether I should have initiated it at all or shut it down at various points. I mean, it was very, very dangerous. It's kind of funny how sometimes you can get more Monday morning quarterbacking from your own agency, people who should know better and have been put in that type of position while they work that job, than you will in the public. But it did matter to me. I did my job, I did it the best I could, and I made a call. A police pursuit involves clearly marked police vehicles with lights and sirens that are utilized during the pursuit. Well, we never got a marked unit or a UC vehicle with a light package anywhere near that suspect truck to even attempt to stop. So no, this was a truck fleeing from someone that was chasing them. They probably did think we are the cops, but we could have been rival gang members, family of the guy who was initially shot to start this whole mess, or anybody else. That doesn't mean that we aren't liable for anything that happens, whether on our side or the suspect's side. And in many ways, it's more dangerous for us because we don't have marked units and we're running around in unmarked cars. As the overall supervisor of the operation, I'm constantly weighing the info coming in regarding what the truck's doing, when the air unit can get up to help us, when we can get help from the other department, and how my folks sound on the radio. And I'm listening to the radio for the obvious information: vehicle directions, speed, movements, traffic conditions, etc. And I'm also trying to pay attention to everybody's tone of voice and how much tension or anxiety I'm hearing when they're transmitting. Because sometimes you have to tell people to just back off a little bit and get out of the chase and settle down a little. The truck exits a freeway after a few miles, crosses over, and gets back on the same freeway heading the other direction. Surveillance units are no longer making any effort to be undercover. It's all they can do to just keep this truck in sight and keep up without crashing. The traffic was light. It was surprisingly light. And I have to say that if it had not been so light, I probably would have called it. I probably would have shut everything down, called everybody off the chase, and regrouped. We would have still done some more work that night to try to locate the truck, but the chase itself would have been done. The truck is going at least 100 down an access road that parallels the freeway, which I remember only because the only car that was near it at that point told me that she had had her car floored and she was still losing ground to this truck. The truck turns south from the freeway and starts flying down a major street. It just got out in front of everybody and we lost sight of it, and we later found out that it had made a westbound turn into a neighborhood there. So when you're on the tail of a car in a situation like this and we lose them, everybody just starts taking different routes from the last known sighted location. People pick what they think is the most likely direction and let everybody know what they're doing on the radio so that we don't have any redundancy. The closest surveillance people start doing this, and that's the first time that I'm not feeling it, meaning I think we may have lost that truck without even knowing if we had our shooter in it or not. In the meantime, we're coordinating help with the other police department for both patrol officers and still trying to get their air unit up to give us a hand to help locate this vehicle and or anybody associated with it. I'd called an officer from the same department who works a plainclothes fugitive detail that's kind of similar to ours, and I was relaying info to him so he could spool up his work group to assist as well, which he was doing. My fear was that all this great volume of assistance that we were asking for was going to be a little too late. I told the guy driving my van to just stop right where we were while we tried to locate that truck. So he stopped literally in the middle of the road and we just sat there. Again, it was late and the traffic was really light and I just didn't want to move. I just wanted to sit and give me a couple seconds to think about things. Where we'd stopped was just short of a neighborhood side street that went to the west. Two of us are still on our phones working on getting the help. Well, unbeknownst to me until later, a couple of their surveillance guys, Slimmer and the other in their UC truck, had located that truck in the neighborhood to our west, and it was just sitting parked in the middle of a cul-de-sac. They and another couple units had conducted a felony stop and determined that there was only one person in the cab, and it wasn't our shooter. They started searching around that area for the other occupant, hopeful that we still had the right guy. He just happened to get out of the truck somewhere. So I'm sitting in the middle of the road in my van with my guys, and I'm listening to the chatter on the radio and talking to my friend on the phone and listening to my guy's thoughts in the van and just trying to mull over all the options. Well, the guy driving starts to say something to me, and at the same time, something kind of draws my attention to my right, so I start to turn my head and look in that direction. Bam! I saw and felt this guy run right into the side of my van, hitting the passenger front door and window just about a foot away from my face. He hits it so hard that it rocks the van and it makes a loud thud sound that everybody heard in the van. He also left a large sweaty smear where his head and arm banged into the window and the door. So we later determined that the guy had jumped out of that truck while they were driving in the neighborhood and just took off running the opposite direction. Well, apparently he was so focused on what was happening behind him, he was just totally oblivious to our van that was sitting in his path in the middle of the road. And if we'd been driving, I'm convinced we would have run him right over. Well, in less than a second, we all realized this is our second guy from the truck. It has to be. And I dropped my cell phone mid-conversation and it hit the floor. The guy's already spun away after smacking into the van and is running around the front of it. The guys in the back are grabbing and opening the sliding doors to jump out, and I'm already 2 feet out and running around the van after the guy. I see no traffic coming with a quick glance left and right, which is a good thing with all the bodies running across in the darkness. The guy's quick, and he has a decent lead on us. We're yelling at him to stop, and we all have our police vests on, so there's no question who we are. Obviously, he knows who we are, but you still make those announcements. Well, he gets across the street, crosses the sidewalk, and he jumps up and onto an 8-foot wall that borders another neighborhood. Well, first, an 8-foot wall is really hard to get over, regardless of what you see on TV and in the movies. And you got to remember, we're also weighed down with at least 20 pounds of gear. 1 or 2 guys had their rifles, and we're not 19 or 20 years old anymore like this kid was. Well, if he gets over that wall, it's going to make this thing 10 times harder to find him and catch him, and more dangerous for everyone. There's a chance he could break into someone's home or hurt them, steal their car to get away. Now it's a vehicle pursuit type of situation. Any of these possibilities aren't good. Well, based on the different angles that we all took as we bailed out of that van, I ended up getting to the guy first. He was just pulling himself up toward the top of the wall, maybe another second or two and he'd have been over and gone. So I jump up and I grab him around his waist with both arms and I skin my knuckles on the wall. I yank him down and off the wall and onto the ground, and he landed with a pretty good thud. Another guy or 2 were with me in a second, and we all immediately took control of his arms and legs and head. We're still treating this like this guy's our shooter, and he could easily be armed, so getting him controlled was the paramount need at the time. I'd never even seen his face so far, other than when he hit the window and I saw that smudged cartoonish face when he smacked into it. As soon as we had him cuffed, one of the guys reaches down and pulls back his t-shirt collar. From our intel, we knew that our shooter had his nickname tattooed on the back of his neck. Precious, he says. We had our guy. Well, knowing that we had cops scattered all over the place, I got on the radio to tell everyone we had one in custody, he was our shooter, and we were code 4, or we were okay. Now, I'm talking later, the majority of the surveillance team laughed because they said they went from being pissed and thinking that we'd lost this possible homicide suspect to basically looking at each other and saying, what'd he just say? I called my friend back from the other agency who I'd been on the phone with, and he'd already heard what had happened, so we had a good laugh and he went back to working what he was working on. It was just a crazy night all around. This night is one of those nights that you'll never forget for a number of reasons. You know, my biggest relief was that all my people were okay and that no one wrapped a car around a light pole, including the suspect. A close second would be that we caught a guy who needed to really be caught. So with that, I close another episode of I Barely Got Here. Thank you for listening, and please check back for new episodes. If you have a question or a comment, please let me know via email, ibarelygodhere@gmail.com, social media, or our webpage, and I'll do my best to address it. Sam42 is 10-7.